There's something about Dreamforge's dungeon crawlers. They have a feel that is just immediately recognizable even without looking at the credits. Like if you've played one of their crawlers, you will recognize their style immediately. Not better or worse than anything else in the genre necessarily, but undeniably unique and weirdly unsettling. They have this uncanny vibe, like something you can't quite put your finger on. At this point, I've played 4 of their games for the channel: Menzoberranzan, Strahd's Possession, Anvil of Dawn, and now Stone Prophet. All capture this same feeling. Is it the strange sound and music, the monster designs, the environments? Or maybe it's their masterful ability to create worlds that both somehow feel lived in and alive, but simultaneously void of all life. I'm sort of rambling, but I think the best I can describe the feeling their games give me is the feeling of occupying a liminal space. Oh no! That strange transitional feeling that fills the player with unease, eeriness, and the feeling of not quite being alone. This is going to be weirdly specific, but have you ever played a multiplayer map, but done it alone? Just run around in the empty space where there should be others? It's sort of unsettling, like it's so familiar, yet so abstract and bizarre in its vacant state. You feel like you're being watched. That's the vibe Dreamforge games give me. Everything in them feels familiar. The ingredients of a dungeon crawler and fantasy tropes are all there. Even sounds and voice actors are used in between games. But they just put it together a little differently, and in some way I can't quite describe, manage to make their games feel haunted. Even the cinematics they like to toss in transitionally have their own distinct look and feel. Super stilted and slow, as early 3D tended to be, yet fully recognizable. There, but also not. Their games also happen to be absolute bangers. Every single one I've played anyway. This confluence of factors makes Stone Prophet the perfect choice to start out this year's pumpkin season. So join me in venturing into the forgotten tombs of the desert of Har-a-kir. The curse of Anhktepot spares none from its wrath, and only the brave will survive. Bring water.
In the fall of a shadow, the history of the land changed forever. The priests of Ra laid Anhktepot to his rest. The threat to the priests of Ra seemed over, the Hierophant's battle won. Not so. The enmity between priest and pharaoh had just begun.
The first and most obvious change to this title coming from Strahd's Possession is the complete overhaul of the setting. That game took place in the haunted land of Barovia, a place of werewolves, vampires, and all the things that go bump in the night. D&D's version of a Transylvanian nightmare. While we're still playing as the same party, this time around we're cast into the desert of Har-a-kir, a place of blistering sands, cursed mummies, and ancient Egyptian gods. The setting could not be more distinct from its predecessor. I will say, as a gut reaction, I do prefer the setting of the original much more, but found Stone Prophet to be a much better experience from a gameplay and atmosphere perspective.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
It was clear the whole time I played this that Dreamforge learned its lessons from the first game, and used their development time on the sequel very wisely. The engine to run the game remains the same, so it'll be easy for players of the first to slide right into this new adventure. But there were some significant changes and improvements. First and foremost, you'll notice the UI is very different. Outside the visual elements changing from Gothic to Egyptian, you'll notice the menu placement I complained about in my last video has been moved. In that game, the menu would pop up if your mouse got anywhere in the top third of the screen. Here, the menu is a simple button at the bottom of the HUD. I feel that should have been more common sense, but we got there eventually. Actual inventory management operated in the exact same way, with boxes of boxes of boxes filling your inventory. A very clunky system, but one that I enjoy quite thoroughly. Everything has to be in its place. It reminds me of Ultima's system in a weird way, if that system employed grid lines. In a much more controversial change, the spellbook is now not on the main screen anymore. In the last game, you'd click the spellbook and then be able to choose and cast a spell in real time, all while the monsters would be bearing down on you. Now when you click the spellbook, a whole new window opens up. This effectively pauses the game while you browse through all your spells. From an accessibility standpoint, it is undeniably much better, but from the perspective of building tension, it feels simpler, almost too player-friendly. The game does market itself as horror, and I actually feel like real-time lends itself much better to that sort of atmosphere. The feeling of frantically searching your spellbook while a horde of zombies pulls your fighter apart is great game design. I did like the system here, but I felt it would be much more at home in a traditional fantasy game. For horror, keep the action going non-stop. It also introduced the weird issue of not being able to tell when your spells were off cooldown, as you needed to enter that menu to choose a spell to cast, wait an indeterminate amount of time, then open it again hoping the cooldown was done. There was no way to track it from the main screen, at least that I could see. It's a minor issue, but one that was annoying nonetheless. While we're talking about spells, though the new system is a touch different, it did function the same at its base level. D&D rules. Clerics learn new spells when they level up, and mages need to find scrolls and memorize them. Both needed to select spells before resting to have them ready for use, and expended spells could only be recovered through rest. Standard stuff. There was a surprisingly large variety of spells in the game, and the experience gain meant that unlike Eye of the Beholder, we would absolutely reach a level high enough to use them all. Unfortunately, the great variety of spells almost felt superfluous. There's not a lot of call for poison-based spells against the undead. There was some attempt to get the player to vary their spell usage with a few fire-immune enemies in the game, but for the most part, you could just pick the best fire spells at each level and be good to go in 95% of encounters. I will say I did enjoy the Insect Swarm spell, which makes a damage over time area, but it could just as easily hurt you, making direct damage more effective from a min-maxing perspective. Still, it's fun to swap things up regardless. Buffing was also a lot less necessary in this entry, whereas in Strahd's Possession you had to keep your cleric on constant negative plane protection duty to prevent level drain. Here that status effect is non-existent. I talked in that video about the chaos it added to battle, constantly having to keep magical wards up to keep from losing levels, and I still stand by the opinion that while it can be tedious, it does add an undeniable tension to all the combat. I think a good compromise would have been to reduce the number of enemies that can level drain. Removing them entirely felt like a step too far in the other direction. They did add another feature that may have been intended to replace buffing, and that's the requirement to drink water. This quest takes place in a boiling hot desert, so thirst makes sense as a mechanic. There are two ways to get water: either find water skins, or have your cleric cast Create Water. Unfortunately, this is almost immediately rendered a moot feature. Create Water is a level 1 cleric spell. Unless you don't have a cleric, you will never need to worry about water. I'm not necessarily advocating for survival mechanics in my dungeon crawler, but if you're going to add a feature, you probably shouldn't make it easily countered by a level 1 spell. It feels like it was added, but they didn't want to fully commit to the mechanic. A real shame, as it could have brought a bit of that tension back in. I would be a lot more reluctant to rest constantly if I was in fear of dehydration. As it stands in the game, all it really does is force you to cast Create Water once a day, and once again, make a cleric all but necessary as part of your party. I will say they did fix one thing I complained about last time, and that is that you can now see when your party is buffed on the main screen. They put an almost impossible to see border on your character portrait when buffed. it's something, I guess. And that sort of leads into one of Stone Prophet's few weaknesses, or maybe strengths based on your opinion. While the game is very fun to play and super atmospheric, it is a massive step back in terms of difficulty. When comparing it to my experiences in Strahd, the two games could not be more different. Every encounter in Strahd, right up till the end, felt like a threat. Here in Stone Prophet, there might have been one dungeon where I felt there was true danger, and even then, that was mostly due to poison enemies. Ironically, the only time in the game I felt I really struggled was during the final boss battle. In Strahd, the final battle was an absolute breeze at the end of a punishing game. Now, a big part of this may be my imported party. As I already mentioned, I transferred my party from the first game into this one, and as a result they started with a bunch of powerful equipment and at a higher level than the game's default party would. I feel this imbalance in games when importing is common, but usually the advantage tapers off quickly. Like you might be extra tough for a couple of dungeons, then the scaling will catch up and level the playing field. Baldur's Gate 2 is a great example of this being done right. If you import in that game, you'll start strong, but quickly the game scales as to make your prior gains irrelevant against the greater quest. Here, some of the items that were best in slot in the first game continue to be best in slot for the entire experience. That paladin sword I got early on in Strahd's possession, there is literally never anything better than it that I found. While it's sort of cool to have such a mighty weapon, it kills character progression when you start the game with the best armor and the best weapons available. It's a bit of a shame in another way as well. Though I used my previous party, I did still mess with the character creator a bit, and they put a lot of effort into it. It starts with a unique cinematic approaching a Vistani caravan, and involves selecting your characters in a sort of tarot card minigame. It's even fully voice acted. I do think importing is what most players will do, which is a shame as the creator adds a good amount of context and atmosphere to the opening moments. Looping back to those UI changes, something else that was different was how the party was positioned. If you'll recall, in the last game, your leftmost two party members were considered the front rank, whereas the rightmost were considered the rear rank. That's been changed a bit. Now the middle two are in the front, and the outer two are considered the back. The way it works is that members in the front can attack and be attacked in melee, whereas members in the rear were limited to spells and ranged, but generally safe from being attacked in melee. Outdoor spaces throw this out the window as your party is considered dispersed. While this worked quite well in the last entry, I felt things either weren't working as intended this time, or I was misunderstanding something.
You are probably misunderstanding, you root vegetable.
You're probably right. Dreamforge would never lead me astray. Love you, Dreamforge. Essentially, I kept finding that regardless of being indoors or outdoors, I was often having my rear rank inexplicably in the line of fire. And further, I often seemed to be able to attack with my rear rank when they shouldn't have been able to reach. Also, as a small rant, no one in my entire party, nor any new NPCs I came across, were able to use my rad throwing dagger that came with me from the first game. I don't know if it was a bug, but it made me sad. There are some beast race NPC companions that could possibly account for the longer reach, and perhaps my enemies were benefiting from a similar advantage against me, but I definitely felt this time around my party composition was much more loose, and my rear rank far less safe. Speaking of party composition, I did choose to actually take companions this time around instead of trying to min-max my main characters. They are far more fleshed out in this entry, each with their own backstories and even the occasional bit of location-dependent dialogue. There aren't a huge number of possible NPC companions, but each felt well fleshed out and interesting. Except maybe Trahan Ket. That guy is as basic bitch as it comes.
Jesters of the Desert.
While thematically the characters were interesting, I found they lacked variety in terms of class. There isn't one mage companion in this game. If you failed to bring a mage with you, either from the last game or made one on creation, you're just shit out of luck. No mage spells for you. Conversely, there are 2 fighters and 2 clerics as possible companions. In a nice quality of life addition for a game this age, if you chose to dump companions, they could always be re-added later. Many crawlers of this time didn't allow this, so it's nice to have, and truthfully, quite necessary. There's a handful of escort quests where you need to take a civilian NPC to a designated location, forcing you to drop party members temporarily. If you couldn't get them back, that would be a real drag. I called the first Ravenloft game open world due to its, at the time, unheard of freedom of choice and movement in a larger overworld. Stone Prophet makes that game look downright confining in comparison. From the moment you start your quest, you can explore the deserts of Har-a-kir in any way you wish. There are of course areas that should be done first, and prerequisites, but ultimately most of the time it's up to you in what order you want to do dungeons in. So long as the mummy's curse is broken, at the end of the day, it's your call how you get to that point. Exploration could be genuinely rewarding as well. Lots of little side quests and loot stashes tucked away in corners of the desert. And that map system from Dreamforge's prior games that allows you to label your map to your heart's content makes exploring and charting out landmarks in the desert super rewarding. I will never stop harping on how big a difference having a good auto map makes in these games. The last thing I need to touch on, and possibly the biggest improvement in this title, is the interaction with NPCs and just the way the story is delivered in general. It was pretty good in the lands of Barovia, but here it goes a step farther still. Each NPC had their own pixel artwork that would play as you talked to them, often changing and reacting in real time as the conversation took shape. Aside from the pixel artwork being absolutely blessed, it did a ton to build on the atmosphere of the game. Talking to this guy as he slowly dies, festering in the sand and stricken by the Pharaoh's curse. That was haunting. Speaking with Glorintha, the undead paladin, you felt the weight of the mummy's curse and her remorse at her fate. And that leads into what might be best of all. This game, similar to Dreamforge's later title Anvil of Dawn, contains a unique song developed just for the game. It's not as dramatic as our singing dwarven blacksmith friend, but boy does it set a mood. But first, before we hear that, we need to go get lost in a desert. Our story opens with another of Dreamforge's beautiful early 3D cinematics. We're living our best lives, still in the service of Lord Delt in El Terrell, when we receive word of a mysterious wall of light on the outskirts of the kingdom. As Hell Riders and loyal servants to good, we rush to investigate. We receive the briefest of orders from our commanding officer, and then head into the light. We emerge in a desert. A Vistani woman lies on the ground, clearly infected with some sort of disease and barely clinging to life. She pleads with us to leave. The desert of Har-a-kir contains only death. She mentions a brother who is also trapped here, and that we need to take her dagger to him. It is her legacy. With that, the woman begins to decompose before our eyes, rotting away to a ghoul, then a skeleton, then nothing but clothing remains. Clearly, this is more than a simple illness. Before we can consider turning back, the wall of light closes behind us. We're once again trapped in a distant land with no way home.
Oh shit, here we go again.
We grab the dagger and move into the desert, before long finding a lone tent. Within is a woman who has had her eyes and her tongue cut out. She is desperate to communicate but cannot. She draws us a map in the sand of something to the east, so we go that way and discover a well. Approaching it, we're greeted with the screech of the undead rising. They aren't really a challenge, but god damn that was a good jump scare. In the well, we find a woman who is hiding from an evil creature deeper within. The evil creature is a big frog. Choosing to be a good Samaritan, we escort the woman back to her village nearby. The reward is little more than a thanks, but we can enter the village now and start introducing ourselves. There are a ton of people to meet here, and most of them are complete assholes. One tent is occupied by a sick woman, her husband, and their child. The child is scared by us and runs off into the desert. Her father decides there is no point to go after her and that she's good as dead already. Dude, she ran away like 14 seconds ago. You can still catch her. This might be the laziest man I have ever met, or maybe just the worst father. Continuing to meet the wonderful inhabitants of the village, their leader is equally shitty to us, saying that we have personally brought Anhktepot's curse down upon them. Pretty sure these guys were sick before we got here, but sure. He also might be the first ever Soyjack. The resemblance is uncanny. The only real benefit we gain from exploring in the town is finding Piotr in a small tent on his own. He is the brother to the Vistani woman we saw become a skeleton in the desert. He joins us to seek vengeance on Anhktepot and try to escape this land back to Barovia. We never did find what that blind mute woman wanted, so we head back to the well and pick up Trahan Ket on the way. He's another wanderer and the most generic character in the game. He won't be with us for very long. Back in the well, we can scour the place to find it was once the shrine to Nefertiri. We pick up a hat of telepathy as well as some magic eyeballs and bring them back to the woman in the tent. With these, she can now see and speak to us with her thoughts. She reveals that it was not Anhktepot that did this to her, but instead a priestess of Set named Isu. This priestess is an enemy of Anhktepot and controls a great mummy of her own, or did anyway. Sounds like her mummy may have been destroyed. Sucks to suck. The blind woman further says that we may be the heroes of prophecy, because of course we are, and says she can lead us to an obelisk in the desert where our destiny will unfold. Awesome. She leads us there and then departs. But before exploring the interior of the obelisk, we first check out the surrounding ruins. Here we find Har-a-kir, a cat centaur type creature who is wounded. We offer to help him with his wounds and he joins the party.
He's beautiful.
Hey, crush on muscular cat men on your own time. You're on the clock here. Entering the obelisk, we meet the stone prophet himself. He's sort of obnoxious in that he lets us know we are indeed the prophesized ones, destined to bring freedom to the people of Har-a-kir, but then immediately says he's not going to tell us anything and that we need to figure it out on our own. Then he just vanishes. Thanks, man. This whole dungeon is huge. We fight man-scorpions, minotaurs, and exploding undead burial mask creatures, all in a pursuit of 8 paper scraps. These paper scraps form a codex that we can then use to decipher the prophecy in the main room. I'm going to be real here. I did go and get all the map pieces, but I am absolutely too lazy to actually use this cipher to decipher it. I just googled what it says. I won't read the whole thing because it is a massive wall of text, but the bullet points are that Anhktepot sucks, we need to get judged by the guardian at the gate of the dead, we need to find a music-loving ghost, we need to fix some props, we need to do something with a bird and a whistle, and a whole bunch of other dramatic-sounding prophecy stuff. Leaving this place, we start exploring the desert at random and come to the Temple of Set, Egyptian god of chaos and storms. His temple is all about the snakes. In the entryway, we can find the evil priestess the blind woman mentioned earlier, Isu. Turns out she tried using a mummy of her own, Senmet, to usurp the power of Anhktepot. It didn't work, and Senmet was supposedly destroyed, but she keeps talking about him like he's still around. Moving through the temple, we gain one of the most useful items in the game, the Helmet of True Sight. It makes illusory walls transparent, so finding secrets is now a breeze. We use the helmet to find 8 hidden snake statues, and then use those to open 8 treasure vaults. Most importantly, we grab a magical watering urn. We then head back out into the desert. In a bit of a twist, we come across a friendly desert troll who actually offers to join with us. I say yes despite his unsettling countenance. He is pretty tough, but notably cannot equip anything, and has 4 less inventory slots than anyone else. We eventually wander into the Temple of Harvest, and here we meet probably my favorite NPC in the game, a cat named Shafar. We can use talk to animals and have a discussion with her. The discussion ultimately leads to us convincing her to get us a key through a small crack in the wall, but I have to say this character is hilarious. They style themselves as a great warrior, and make it seem like everything they're doing is out of pity for us, or to prove their great worth to us. They are the embodiment of the cat spirit. I really wish they were a recruitable companion.
My rage overwhelms me, and in a moment I shall rush headlong through the crack to fight and tear, to rip and rend. Nothing evil shall withstand my assault. I am almost ready. In a moment I shall lunge within. Just wait for a few more seconds. I'm almost ready. I am.
Also, the artwork is amazing on the dialogue box. We eventually come to an old monk who is doing his best to maintain the temple that once gave life to the region, but he's having a rough time of it and all his plants seem to be dead. Lucky for him, we have a magical watering bucket and are able to restore the garden. This gives us access to the underground part of the temple, but first, that little girl that ran away from the village earlier is here. We can offer to escort her back to town, but have to dump the troll out of the party to do so. He has what might be the saddest NPC dialogue in the entire game when you do this.
Anhktepot, go back. Go hide in desert. No one wants Anhktepot. No one ever want him.
I can relate, buddy. Under the temple, there are a ton of quest items that we'll need for later, including a special chain, the scroll of retirement, and a chest of raw which we can use to free the guardian here. We also get the answer to the riddle of the Sphinx conveniently written down for us. There are also panther enemies on one of the floors that turn into skeletons when you kill them. First we had exploding mountain lions in Thunderscape, and now skeletonizing mountain lions here. What's next in horrible panther deaths? Done with this place, we move into the northern desert, which is lousy with desert trolls. Fire works best to put them down for good. Apparently water and frost spells will do in a pinch as well, but I'm a fire mage at heart. In a particularly evil-looking cave, we come across an undead paladin who says her curse is tied to the mummy Senmet. But so far as we know, Senmet should be dead. We take the paladin with us and go back to the Temple of Set. A hidden chamber below the temple reveals that the greater mummy Senmet is not dead, just undead, but he cannot be killed by regular means. He will just come back to life even when beaten down. The trick is to use that scroll of retirement from earlier to put him down for good. With him dead, the paladin is freed from her curse and departs for good. There is zero reward for this side quest, but we get a warm fuzzy feeling, I guess. We pick back up our troll friend, and even get him some super cool looking armor, and then we move on to find the Sphinx, because you cannot have a game with an Egyptian setting without having a Sphinx's riddle section. It is literally illegal. The interior of the Sphinx is probably the game's largest dungeon, but comes front-loaded with a huge buff. There's a statue near the entrance. If you give it a calcite wishing cup, it will give you one of 3 permanent buffs. Don't ask me where I picked up the wishing cup, I literally can't remember. For the buffs, we can choose fire resistance, poison immunity, or to remove thirst forever. Fire resistance is too niche to be worthwhile, thirst is pointless as it was never really an obstacle, so poison immunity seems like the best choice. It is helpful, but the game sort of rug pulls you and starts introducing disease to the game at this point. It acts just like poison, except your immunity doesn't block it. Seems kinda like a monkey paw sort of boon, but whatever I guess. We also find the last recruitable NPC in here. Aside from having what might be the most terrible character portrait I've ever seen, he's also a werejackal. What benefit does this grant in-game? I have literally no idea. But he seems to be living his best life, able to become a furry at will, so I guess I'm happy for him. We kick out the troll again for the final time. There's a memory flask here that, when opened, reveals more of what happened here. Many years past, Anhktepot ruled as pharaoh, but he was not content to rule. He sought immortality above all else. The priests of Ra saw this as against their god's will, and opposed the mad pharaoh, and one by one the priests were killed by Anhktepot's touch of death. One particularly high-ranking priest, the Hierophant, snuck in on Anhktepot while he slept, killing him with a dagger in the name of Ra. They laid the slain Anhktepot to rest, but that would just be the start of their eternal struggle. Before leaving the Sphinx, we also pick up a golden whistle that will be necessary later. Done with the Sphinx and back in the desert, we come to the apex of this game's atmosphere and setting. We can find a ghost in the desert that can be convinced to sing us a song if we play a lute for her.
Where souls, where dreams the sands do keep, our dead speak of my breathless son. Shrouded in dark and endless sleep, in vaults lost near the rising sun. Sweet sounds my child played before the ancient Pharaoh came. In innocence and ages past, when all life's great rotted rage. Yet wrought light, one heart denied, our Pharaoh's will grown grim and cold. Thief of life, he tried to steal endless life from the gods' hold. So many died, so few survived, in lands lost to the mummy king. My son and others lost their lives, where in sorrow no voices sing. Taking my son in darkness lies, in vaults lost near the rising sun. Low beneath the giant tide, Tekin's music forever done. Age after age, the statue stands, unmoving, bound fast with shame. There above our restless sands, awaiting my sweet son's name.
Awesome. I still think the singing dwarf's anvil song is better, but this one's pretty good too. She hints in the song that we need to find a statue of her dead son in the desert, so we do just that. Attach a chain from earlier to him, then watch as the statue comes alive and opens the way to the royal burial hall. At the end of this dungeon, we come to the guardian of the land of the dead. She judges our acts of good versus evil and will allow us to speak with the dead based on this. I was a good boy, so I don't know what happens if you choose to be an ass to everyone. Maybe a second playthrough later to find out. Temporarily transported to the land of the dead, we get some very important information from the ghost of a dead adventurer. He says that he had found a way to escape Har-a-kir, something called the Scroll of Return. However, when he slept, the villagers came upon him, blaming him for their troubles much as they had us. They chased him outside the village and far into the desert, past the Wall of Ra, a magical wall of searing heat that surrounds the deserts of Har-a-kir. Once within the wall, he was burned alive. The Scroll of Return, being magical in nature, still rests there and can be used to escape the desert, but is unreachable unless the Wall of Ra can be brought down and Har-a-kir freed. I don't know, it sounds less complex than the catalog needed to escape Barovia last time, so I'll take it. We're nearing the end now, but we need to piece together everything to set up the final confrontation. Using the guidance from the ghost, we're able to locate the buried Temple of Ra. Inside, we find the Hierophant is also here, and also a powerful mummy much like Anhktepot, though he's in a dormant state. We can use the seal of the Hierophant, which we've been constructing this entire game, and open a portal here next to the inactive mummy. There's no distant end to the portal yet, but we'll fix that soon enough. We next come to the final dungeon of the game, Pharaoh's Rest, the ultimate resting place of the mummy lord Anhktepot. Isu, the priestess of Set and sworn enemy of Anhktepot, is here weirdly enough. She doesn't do much, but she really hates us for killing Sekhmet. Turns out her plan was to merge the power of Sekhmet with the Hierophant to create a mummy under her control with the power to oppose Anhktepot. As we killed Sekhmet, this plan is now foiled, and she states that while the Hierophant may be able to oppose Anhktepot on his own, he is unable to leave the Temple of Ra where he slumbers. Don't worry, we're working on that. The final door to Anhktepot is guarded by the warrior that failed to defend him in life. Well, sort of. The warrior has been transformed into a living doorway. The only way to clear it is to put the warrior's heart into the door to lift his curse. Unfortunately, his heart was removed and hidden in the sands. Good news though, we can use that golden whistle we found in the Sphinx to summon a magic falcon to track down the heart for us. And with that, we awaken Anhktepot. As far as final fights go, this one is pretty bad. Anhktepot himself is completely immune to damage, so don't even try. He also wields death magic that will obliterate your party in seconds. The goal here is to essentially kite him through the entire dungeon, back to a portal you can open with his seal. Getting him into the portal is a nightmare though. He won't really follow you unless you're right beside him, and there's no way to prevent him from attacking you. So the whole thing turns into getting him to go a few steps, having your party wiped out, running away to resurrect everyone, and then repeating. It's very tedious and anticlimactic, but I guess that's what I get for complaining that Strahd was too easy. Once we get him through the portal, he's teleported into the Temple of Ra where he does battle with the Hierophant. We flee as the temple begins to crumble under the strain of their explosive battle. Outside, we find that the Wall of Ra has fallen. The Scroll of Return is now accessible. Making a mad dash into the eastern desert, we can find it amongst the sun-scorched bones of an adventurer. Using the scroll opens a portal back to El Terrell. And before leaving through it, the one friendly villager makes a point of thanking us for saving them from the mummy's curse. Another ancient evil defeated, we return home for some much needed relaxation. We even get to bring the Catman and Werejackal with us. All in a day's work. I really enjoyed this one, and maybe more to my surprise than anything, even liked it more than Curse of Strahd. The story was one of the best told in any dungeon crawler I've played in recent history. The beautiful dialogue animations, paired with the great voice acting and drama I've come to expect from Dreamforge, made this an experience second to none. The story itself, while often a touch cliché, is told in such a wonderfully engrossing way, sprinkling in those trademark Dreamforge 3D sequences at just the right times, knowing when an NPC needs to drop in to tell the story, or when things can be told through context and journal scraps. The pacing is such that you never feel like the combat or the story is outstaying its welcome. Each comes in bursts and intermeshes well throughout to push each other forward. A rare feat in a genre that has dozens of titles known to feel like a slog to get through. The true open world design of the game and freedom of exploration feels like such a massive step forward for this type of game. I only feel it's a shame more games weren't produced on this engine and in this style. We had optional encounters, a basic morality system, and significantly improved character interaction in a genre that tends to put that sort of thing on the back burner. It is really too bad that Menzoberranzan, that released on the same engine after this one, didn't exploit that great open world feeling, instead stepping backwards into the more on-rails experience that these games usually are. That game was a great experience too, but I don't think it reaches the highs that Stone Prophet did, which again is really saying something for me as someone who isn't usually huge on the Egypt aesthetic. I think a big reason I like dungeon crawlers in general is the weird lost media vibe they tend to give me. Nostalgic, yet also feeling so unique and special, like I'm breaking some sort of new ground each time I play one. And Dreamforge has mastered giving that feeling in all their games, but none more so than this one. So do yourselves a favor, enter the Wall of Ra, explore the depths of Har-a-kir, skeletonize some panthers. Just remember to watch out for the Pharaoh's curse. See you in the next video.